all I want. It's wonderful.
It's not perfect.
Yeah.
There's my daughter, Miss Naomi.
Hi, Naomi. You
Hi.
get a shout out in your mom's bio tonight.
Oh, good. She read it to me, and I made sure she also shouted out her grandcat as well.
That's right. Yes.
Hey, all right.
Hi,
And there's Kathy Luna, long time.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
You're muted, Kathy.
Muted. Yes, I said hi. How nice to see you all.
Hi.
Yeah.
What a treat. Here.
Oh, and Jacqueline. Hi, Jacqueline.
People I know. Caroline, how are you? Muted.
Hi. Hi, Kathy.
Hi.
I'm good. I'm well. Thank you. Good
Good.
to see you again.
You too. How's the writing going?
It's going well, thanks to my group of, fellow supporters. Yay.
This group is so important.
Mhm.
It is. Hi, Kimberly. You're in the yellow room today. You have such pretty colors on your walls. Yummy colors.
Kathy, your background is so beautiful. I love it.
Oh, thanks.
You have
These are my Instagram photos that I
oh, they're
take
awesome.
and post, although I haven't done any in a
They're
million years.
gorgeous.
It's fun.
Okay.
Bring a little
You're so
inside.
talented.
Thanks. Maria, I see your name, but not you. You're in the dark.
I'm mysterious.
Very
I'm the
mysterious.
mystery woman. It's because I don't, I'm not doing the overlight here. I'll just shine the, oh my God. My hair is a mess because I've been walking. It's better this way, trust me.
Okay. It was a good day for walking, huh? So beautiful.
Oh my God, it was gorgeous. Yeah, it was gorgeous.
Did any of you see that New Yorker cartoon that said that Zoom meetings were like a seance? Are you there? I can't hear you. It was great.
That's
great.
like that.
You're muted. We can't hear you.
Hi, Kate. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Katie.
Glasses.
Hi,
I can't
Lisa.
read names.
Long time
Lisa
no
Extra.
see.
Angela.
Peggy.
Oh my God.
Look at so many people.
Oh, I got people from California here.
Aw.
Oh,
Nice.
See Linda. Hi, Linda.
Hi, Dorothy.
Hi.
Hi,
Hi,
Peggy.
Laura. Hi,
I should have worn
Lily.
my glasses.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Steph.
So many people. Hi, sis. So many people. Oh, somebody got
This is terrific.
That.
so why do I have this weird thing in the corner that looks like a phone?
Somebody's on the phone.
Oh,
Oh, somebody's calling in.
Echo to the
No,
desk.
I wasn't. I think that was me mistakenly.
Yes.
Hi, Jenny.
Okay, good.
there's Cherie. Cherie, put your
Yes.
video on.
Here I am. Can you see me now?
No,
Oh. Hang on.
I see your name, but I don't see your picture.
Hi, Toby.
Oh, there's Cece.
Hi, Caroline.
Hi. Oh, wait, who's that?
I keep trying to get my picture. For some reason, it's
Hi,
not working.
Kari.
Oh, that's Cherie. I should have known that voice from anywhere.
It's not showing up.
But I'm
Just
trying to
go to-
figure out.
Go to video and click on it.
This is always my favorite part of these readings, all of the hellos and your beautiful faces popping up seemingly out of nowhere.
Oh my gosh. Elizabeth Porto. Hi.
I don't know why it's not letting me. I keep hitting it.
I see Jacqueline.
I don't look that nice
Hi,
anyhow.
Elizabeth.
So
Hi, everyone.
We'll give everyone just another minute or two to filter in and get their cameras worked out. We are recording this, so if you know of anyone who is unable to join us this evening, there will be a recording available that you are free to share. We'll upload it to YouTube or something equally as easy to share with everyone.
I just lost all of you. I can't see you now.
We're here, Lee. We're still
We're
here.
here. Can you hear?
Listen, I don't know. I hit something.
Try gallery view.
No, I'm
you-
not seeing anything. I'm seeing another
Scroll
whole.
to the bottom of your screen, Lee,
Worry.
and you'll see a blue video
Hi, Kari.
icon.
Julie.
All these
Julie.
is, oh, I love it. I love it so much. Hi, Elaine.
Okay, I got you.
Let's get started. I don't see, I guess people are still kind of trickling in, but maybe I'll start with the technical logistics of the evening for all of you. What we'll ask you all to do throughout the reading is to mute yourself if you could. After the reading, there'll be an opportunity for an awkward Zoom applause, which never quite works because Zoom only picks up on one sound or screen at a time. But feel free to unmute yourself when we do that round of applause for each reader at the end of their reading. We also recommend that if in the upper right-hand corner, if you're on your computer, if you click on view and switch to speaker view, because what we'll be doing throughout the course of the evening is spotlighting our readers so that they are the ones who pop up on your screen.
No
Lee,
worries.
I am up on your screen right now. Is that true? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So welcome, everybody. It's so lovely to see all of your faces, especially after such a long winter and also these beautiful last couple of days. I don't know about all of you, but these last few days of warmth and sunshine have really given me hope that we will all be together again soon, hopefully soon, hopefully soon. It's inspired me to shower and put on makeup. I mean, this weather has really been amazing. I haven't done my makeup since like October, maybe. So I hope it's inspiring all of you just as much. I'm happy to be hosting this evening, this wonderful reading of members of our revision intensive, which for those of you who don't know is a 6-month series that we just started at Writers in Progress. It's been going for 4 months now. And what it is a group of writers, 8 writers who commit to spending 6 months together,
No, I'm not.
supporting each other through the revision process. Dory, do you mind muting people?
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm trying to.
And just a reminder, if you could all mute yourself while we talk, that'll help cut back on feedback and echoes and things like that. So yes, the revision intensive. It's a 6-month intensive that we are 4 months into, and it really has been this phenomenal combination of all of the things that I love about Writers in Progress. It's part support group, part craft conversation, part generative workshop. It's an opportunity for all of us to sort of spend some time together, diving deep into the real labor of revision. And I'm so happy to have the readers here tonight celebrating all of the work that they've been doing over these last few months. For those of you who don't know, we had previously advertised that Madeleine Zadig would be joining us. She unfortunately had a family emergency, so she's not here tonight, but we will be hearing from Madeleine Haber, Caroline Wampol, and Kimberly Perez. I wanted to share a quote with all of you that I read recently by Danielle Evans, excuse me, who's the author of Before You Suffocate Your Own Fool Self and another collection of stories that I always forget the title of. She loves a long title, so I can't remember the name of it, but it just recently came out. And in an interview, she was asked essentially to discuss the choices that she makes as a writer, both in her revision process and in the choice to be a writer in the world. The interviewer, Michelle Philgate, asked, "What choices do you consider when choosing to be a writer, when you sit down to write and as you revise your writing?" And Danielle had this this beautiful response, which I think ties in so perfectly to the work that these writers have been doing in the last 4 months. She said, in the first draft, choice belongs almost entirely to the characters. In the first draft, I think of choice in terms of what it can tell me about where there are possibilities or tensions. My choices as a writer come in more during revision, when I'm trying to make decisions about what I want the story to be. The story has to belong to itself in the first draft, and in the second and third, I get to decide what I want to emphasize or downplay, what rules I want to assign the story once I see what it wants to be. And then she goes on, it's similar to the question of wanting to write. That is a first draft question for me. I didn't choose that. I didn't choose wanting to write. The question of what kind of writer I'm going to be or how I can make that into a life, that is a choice that I feel lucky to choose every day. And I love that quote so much because it really emphasizes the real work of revision, the choice that goes into the work that we do as writers. And it also emphasizes the choices that we make as writers to come together and support each other. Um, for those writers in the audience, I'm sure you feel similarly to Danielle that we don't necessarily have a choice to love writing the way that we do, but we do have a choice of how we fill our lives with that work and how we come together to support each other. And so much of what we do here at Writers in Progress is about that choice to come together, to support each other, to build each other up, to inspire the work that we all have within us. So yeah, hopefully that'll inspire you tonight as we listen to these wonderful readers. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first reader, Caroline Wampol. Caroline Wampol is a writer, artist, musician, and performer who lives in Montague, Massachusetts. In a previous life, she was the co-founder of and bass player and singer for the rock funk band Big Soul, which had a platinum record in France in the 1990s. She has also been an art teacher, improv theater director, and expat painter in Paris. When she's not painting or writing, she produces short documentary videos with her filmmaker husband Cedric. He's here tonight. She is currently working on a memoir about how being in a rock band led her to her true home of art. And you can find more about Caroline at carolinewampol.com. Caroline.
Thanks, Emily. Great. Well, I'm going to be reading a piece that is from the beginning of my memoir in progress. It's an early chapter that I have revised several times, and the year is 1988, and the place is Buffalo, New York. So. I sat frozen in bed, listening to the voice coming through the answering machine. The words were punctuated by deep, painful sounding breaths. Hello? This is Vince Fusco, the drummer. Pause. You people never called me back. Another pause, breath. Don't let me find out this was a setup. Click. I stayed frozen for a minute, terrified by the ominous words and Darth Vader-like breathing. Then I threw the covers off the futon and stumbled to my feet to call Kelleth, who was working late at the food co-op. My mind raced. Is this what happens when you don't call drummers back? Oh no, does he have our home address? Doesn't he work for the post office? Going postal had recently become a popular phrase after a postal worker had gone on a killing spree at his workplace. I imagined Vince climbing the stairs to our apartment, wheezing as he went, breaking down the door and unloading a machine gun clip while our cat Theotis looked on helplessly, unable to dial 911. Of all the wildly unrealistic scenarios I'd imagined for our band, appearing on the David Letterman show, warming up for James Brown, being gunned down by an angry drummer was not one of them. Who knew finding a drummer would be so hard? It was November. We'd been in Buffalo since June, right after graduation. Back then, when it was still sunny and warm, the plan had sounded so simple. Kelleth laid it all out like an architect unfolding a blueprint onto a table. We'll get jobs, find an apartment, and start a band. Like Sly Stone says, all we need is a drummer. Fortunately, Buffalo was cheap. Even though our respective degrees in humanities and ethnomusicology limited us to minimum wage jobs, by August we'd saved enough money to move out of Kelleth's mother's house and into a one-bedroom apartment for $325 a month. Soon after we moved in, Kelleth pulled out his old Fender Music Master bass from its case and handed it to me. Up until that point, I'd assumed that learning bass would be relatively easy. I figured if I could learn the imperfect subjunctive in French, I could learn how to play a few bluesy bass lines. But as I cradled the cool wood neck and touched the long, thick strings with all their possibilities, I felt like an idiot. What on earth was I doing? I'm not a bass player. Kelleth's voice cut through my thoughts. Here, play the top string. I plucked the top string with my index finger, making a deep bomp sound. Okay, now play a double note. I plucked the string with my index finger again and then immediately followed it with my middle finger, making a bomp bomp sound, which I later learned is the foundation of much soul and funk bass playing. A satisfying warmth spread through my belly. Congratulations, said Kelleth, using his game show host voice. You're in the band now. That's it, I said. I couldn't believe it. You're coordinated and you have rhythm, Kelleth said. Now you just have to practice. So I did. Bass playing gave me something to look forward to other than selling health food and vitamins at my job at Feel Right, Natural, and Gourmet. Stan, a customer friend, helped me change my strings and gave me pointers to play along with the old blues and rhythm and blues covers that Kelleth queued up for me on cassette tapes. Chuck Berry, Muddy Waters, John Lee Hooker, early Rolling Stones. Meanwhile, Kelleth somehow wrangled enough money from our slim budget to buy PA speakers, and we found a rehearsal space on the edge of town for only $75 a month. The last step was putting an ad for drummers in the classifieds and on the bulletin board at the music store. And then we waited for the phone to ring and waited. A few guys called, but once they found out we didn't have any gigs lined up, they weren't interested. By October, we still didn't have a drummer. Days were getting shorter, darker, and colder. I wondered if we'd moved to the wrong city. On my days off in between learning bass lines, I looked out our apartment window at the flat gray sky, pressing down like a lid over Buffalo, and wondered if I'd missed my chance to be an artist by not braving New York City like Patti Smith and the Ramones and other creative souls who put up with crime, cockroaches, and grungy living conditions to pursue their art. But I'd already put up with those things in Boston in the early 80s, and no art had been made. When Vince answered our ad in mid-October, we were so excited to have a response that we didn't care that he had almost no experience. Yeah, I've only been playing for 10 months, but my friends all say I sound like I've been playing for 10 years. The night of the audition, Kelleth and I stood on a street corner in South Buffalo, stamping our feet and clapping our hands to keep warm. The rehearsal space was in a defunct warehouse that had an auto body shop on the ground floor. Billy, the shop's manager, made extra money by renting the empty rooms upstairs to musicians. He had a vision of creating a flourishing artist community a la Soho or Tribeca, believing that this would somehow magically happen without investing anything into the project. He seemed oblivious to the filthy blue carpeting, asbestos ceilings, and maze-like offices that were more evocative of the movie The Shining than a Soho artist's loft. He also neglected to tell us when we signed a suspiciously handwritten contract that there was no heat. Yet Kelleth and I were determined to make it work. We bought a cheap space heater, washed the graffitied penises off the walls, and collected over 400 empty beer bottles left behind from other bands and traded them in for the deposit. At 6 p.m. sharp, a brown Pontiac Trans Am with an ex-wife in trunk bumper sticker on the back squealed to a stop in front of the warehouse. Black Sabbath blared from the car's speakers for a few seconds and then was suddenly cut short as Vince turned off the ignition and jumped out. He had long dark hair and sideburns and a short, squat body on thin legs, like a rock and roll version of Humpty Dumpty. He looked around and made a face, pulling his mouth down to mimic his handlebar mustache. South Buffalo. I hate this neighborhood. Too many. His voice trailed off. I could tell he was trying to figure out what ethnicity Kelleth was. Never mind. Vince popped the trunk and started to unload his gear, bass drum, snare, cymbals, cymbal stands, and a dozen other odds and ends. Every bag or case was an awkward size which seemed purposely made not to stack. It took all three of us 2 trips to carry the gear from the street up the stairs to our rehearsal room. And by the time we were finished and setting up to play, Vince was breathing so hard I thought he might have a heart attack. So what kind of place is this anyway? He said in between breaths. We tried to explain Billy, the body shop manager's vision, using words like musicians cooperative and artists collective. Vince looked blank. Kelleth pulled out his pocket calendar. So we were thinking we'd like to rehearse at least twice a week, he said. Yeah, sure, said Vince. I am done delivering mail by 4 most days, so if you guys want to rehearse at night, I'm free. If you guys want to rehearse, I felt my body tingle with excitement. I was one of the guys now. I leaned over my bass amp and fiddled with its mysterious knobs, wondering if Vince could tell that I had no idea what any of them meant. I'd never played with a drummer before and hoped I could con Vince into thinking I was a legit musician. I felt like I was the one going to the audition. Kelleth plugged his guitar into his Mesa Boogie amp and unfolded a handwritten set list of songs. Let's start with something simple, he said. How about Stevie Ray Vaughan's version of Mary Had a Little Lamb? Kelleth played the intro and nodded to me and Vince to come in on the downbeat of the second measure. I stared down at my strings, intent on getting the pattern right on impressing Vince, and plucked the first note. And then all hell broke loose. It was as if someone had opened a kitchen closet full of pots and pans, and they'd all crashed to the floor at once. I looked up to see Vince hunched over the drums, arms and legs kicking and hitting furiously in every direction, like a 2-year-old having a tantrum. I tried to play along, but there was no backbeat, no sense of where the 2 and 4 were, nothing at all for me to line up my notes to. It was like trying to play along to an avalanche. I couldn't believe it. Was I actually a better musician than Vince? I'd only ever played with Kelleth, whose playing seemed flawless compared to my fumbling. The thought that I might not be the worst musician in the world, and that I might actually have some natural talent, both thrilled and scared me. After 3 long minutes, the song ended, and Kelleth and I nodded and smiled robotically at Vince. We spoke in unison, not daring to look at each other. That was good, very good, sounds good. Vince seemed pleased. Yeah, I just need to warm up my wrist a little. I haven't played for a couple of weeks, but I'll get in the groove. We limped through 2 more songs, ending the audition as soon as we could without seeming rude, and then made the reverse journey back down to the street to load the drums in Vince's trunk. We barely had a chance to say the requisite, "We'll be in touch," before Vince had yanked the driver's side door open, stuck his head inside, and started screaming at the top of his lungs, "My wallet! Somebody fucking stole my wallet! God damn it! Fucking South Buffalo! Fucking South Buffalo!" We didn't have a chance to ask Vince why on earth he'd left his wallet in the car. He was already behind the wheel, grinding the ignition and peeling out like a drag racer. He drove several yards before he realized he was going the wrong way down a one-way street. Then he screeched the brakes, did a U-turn, and disappeared into the night. We thought we'd never hear from him again, until tonight, when he left the message on the answering machine, suspecting us of what? Setting him up at an audition in order to steal his wallet? The whole thing was absurd, and I was ready to laugh it off, but then I remembered the way he played. He seemed to have no idea how he sounded or cared. He just wanted to hit things. And I shuddered as I stood in my pajamas by the phone, waiting on hold for Kelleth to pick up at the food co-op. Maybe the call from Vince was a sign. Maybe we should quit. I remembered the last conversation I'd had with my stepfather, Carl, when I called home to Boston. "What a waste," he'd said as I tried to paint a rosy picture of my time in Buffalo. "So you're working at the Happy Carrot and playing in your boyfriend's band. I think you've taken a big step backwards." "The store is called Feel Right, for your info, and it's my band too," I said, clenching my fist around the phone, hating that I sounded like a 12-year-old. I'd hoped that Carl, of all people, would understand. He was in a band himself once. He played harmonica. That's how he and my mother met, in a blues bar across the street from our apartment in Cambridge in the 1970s. But now, after Vince's message, I hated to think that Carl was right. What was I doing trying to play in a band? By the time Kelleth got on the line, I had envisioned every worst case scenario. What if he comes after us? We should change the locks. We should call the police. Kelleth talked me down, reassuring me that Vince wouldn't be able to find us. Our number's unlisted, remember? And we didn't tell him where we work. Yeah, but what? What's he gonna do? Bust the door down with his drumsticks? Scare you to death with his handlebar mustache? It would be like someone from Spinal Tap attacking you. Kelleth laughed and I started to relax, the image of Vince with his handlebar mustache making me laugh too. Listen, said Kelleth, there are plenty of other drummers in Buffalo. There's a guy named Ricky I'm gonna call back. He's a blues player. Kelleth paused, seeming to sense that I was questioning the whole endeavor. Your bass playing on Red Rooster is sounding good. You just need to learn a few more and we'll be able to put a set together. Okay, I said, thinking that Kelleth could convince passengers on the Titanic that everything was going to work out. Do you really think I could be a good bass player? I said. Of course, said Kelleth. You just need to keep practicing. Keep practicing, I thought. I can do that. I hung up the phone and curled back up on the futon with Theodis and picked up the book I'd been reading. It was a self-help book my boss Judy at Feelright had given me about forgiveness and seeing the best in people and how every experience can be a teacher, even the negative ones, if you look at them in a certain way. What had this experience with Vince taught me? Well, for one, that I wasn't the worst musician in the world. Maybe I should call him up and thank him. Nah, better not.
Hey.
Woo! Awesome.
That was so wonderful, Caroline. I think that Caroline, I think you really need to start like a side gig where you just read people's work at public readings. I would hire you. I would definitely hire you.
I'll do it. I'm ready. I'm gonna put on my job out. Can I put it on my thing with the next to the like all those lists? Art teacher,
Yeah.
and then okay, professional of other people's. Okay.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you so much, Caroline. God, what a great way to start the night. All right, next up is Madeleine Haber. Madeleine Haber lives in Florence at Rocky Hill co-housing with her dog, Ozzy, daughter Naomi, and grandcat Astro. Writing since her childhood in Brooklyn through a long career in human services, her work explores the human condition from multiple perspectives. She is grateful for having written in a workshop with Pat Schneider for over 25 years. Wow, what a gift. And is a member of Straw Dogs Writers Guild, Writers in Progress workshops, and several peer writing groups. Hopefully some of those wonderful writers are here tonight. Since her retirement, she has been sharing her work in readings and offering some for publication. Her writing can be viewed at her website, www.madelinewrites.com. And that's Madeleine, Madlynn. Madeleine.
Thank you, Emily. I'm going to be reading from a piece that I've written, a memoir about my father. I've been writing this for a long time, and Emily's revision workshop is helping me hopefully get to the end of it. I will be reading to you from the very beginning. It skips around a bit, and this is the beginning of the piece. He wasn't like anyone else's father. That's what I thought as a child growing up in Brooklyn in the 1950s. It's still what I think now that I've lived to be almost as old as he was when he died. Naturally, there are some universal experiences between fathers and daughters that we all share. More than likely, some aspects of my story will resonate with yours. It's the peculiarity of what it was like to be this man's daughter that propels me to write this. My mother chose to marry my father when she was 19 and he was 20. All I ever heard about their getting together was that he was hanging around pool halls and my grandparents objected to her seeing him. From the faded photos of their honeymoon on the boardwalk of Atlantic City, I can see there was an attraction. Their smiling faces while leaning on rented bikes show a romantic, sexy interplay at work. I believe that attraction existed once and was strong enough to propel my not very assertive mother to defy her parents' objections and marry this guy. The allure must have faded pretty quickly. Her parents issued many cautions. He's a bum. He's a no good Nick. He'll never take care of you. Those turned into true prophecy. For 18 years, she struggled in the marriage to try and make him a worthwhile husband and father. I don't recall her ever saying a good word about him. Even in her last years, when dementia set in, I could always get a rise out of her by mentioning my father and watching her come up with old and new insults and complaints. It seems that her disappointment was so profound that it never lost its potency in almost 60 years. My recollection of my father's parents are cloudy. He and his mother smoked so many cigarettes that there's no picturing either one of them without an eye-watering, smoky aura. His mother was not a pretty woman. She wore the same black dress in every photo and every memory I have of her. She was the oldest person I ever saw. Now that I've known any number of people in their 90s, I can say she looked older than any of them. She and my father had the same brown eyes. I think I have them too. Deeply brown, deeply sad. If I ever fell into a psychotic depression, I think I would look just like her. She died when I was 4 years old. His father smiled. He had an actual grin. Maybe he was a drinker. I don't really know. He lived a lot longer than the mother. I was taken to visit him in a nursing home every so often. He saved pennies for me in a cigar box. My grandfather's death was one of the things that turned me into a writer. It was something so out of the ordinary for my life, it had to be written down. First, there is a scene in the hospital where he is dying. It's called Brooklyn Jewish Hospital. He's on the charity ward, a large room with many patients. The other patients are all men. They are of different ethnicities. Some speak Spanish. He has a large bloody bandage around his neck. It's hot, summertime, I guess. There are flies in the room. The flies land on his bandage. They hop around the leaking blood stains. Nobody shoos them away. I don't understand why it is like this. I am 12 years old. I have seen people in hospitals before, like when my aunts, my mother's sisters, had babies. Their rooms were bright and clean. There were flowers and friendly nurses. I don't understand why my grandfather is dying in this ugliness. It makes me angry. I blame my father. My father lived with us for the first 10 years of my life. I guess like any other child, I took his presence for granted. I didn't pay much attention to him. No more attention to him than the steak knives with the yellow plastic handles that were placed on the right side of our dinner plates. Looking back, it seems that when he left, we stopped using those knives, stopped eating dinners around the table. When I think of those years, here's what I remember about my father in bullet points. He never drank coffee. He was the only adult I knew who still drank milk. He loved baseball. He watched one game on TV and listened to one on the radio at the same time. He made people laugh. He and my mother sang songs out loud. It might have only been one time, but I remember it well. He was in the war. In the war, World War II, that is, he had buddies. One was named Hai, who we saw once a year. During the war, he was stationed in Paris and Belgium. He brought home a pair of little wooden shoes and a painted wooden bowl. They're in my china closet now. He didn't have a special job or career. He did different kinds of work. For a while, he worked in a candy store that belonged to my grandmother's brother. Once he sold John Hancock Insurance. I got a bunch of John Hancock coloring books to use while he had that job. Then he worked for the Brillo Company. My mother was a secretary and worried about money all the time because he didn't have a good job. She wanted him to go on family outings, which he didn't want to do. We did all go to the Bronx Zoo, the Botanical Gardens, Rockaway Beach, and Coney Island at least one time each. I have the photos to prove it. He thought the man of the house should get to decide what to watch on TV at night. He had a club chair that no one else was allowed to sit in. He liked to win at card games and once studied all the words in the dictionary so he could beat everyone at Scrabble. I remember the last night he lived with us. I think it was raining. My parents told me they were getting divorced and I went to bed. I heard them talking to my sister from my bedroom. She was crying. She was 7 years older than me, and I think she was worried about telling people she had divorced parents. She was very popular in a sorority and all that. For years, she told her friends that our father was away on a business trip rather than tell them that he moved out. My father came into my room and kissed me goodbye. I wasn't crying. Some days after that rainy night, my father returned for 2 large suitcases. I saw them sitting on the top of the front stairs. Those carpeted stairs were only used by guests. The family used the back stairs. My father took his suitcases down the front steps. He only came back to our house a few times in the rest of the years we lived there, and he always came up the front staircase. A yellow taxi picked him and his suitcases up in front of our house. I watched from the other side of the glass storm door at the top of the stoop. I dug my fingernails into my palms to keep from crying. I blamed my mother. I carried that image of the 10-year-old girl behind the glass door watching her father leave with me for many years. I put that girl into a good many poems. I told her sad story to boyfriends in whose arms I sought comfort. There was no abuse or cruelty in my childhood, just the seeping away of love, the losing of something intangible. My father left me with a wealth of sadness, to be sure, but many odd and absurd moments to laugh at. Here's one. Many of my remembrances of my father as a member of our family are preserved in photos. We even had a number of reels of 8mm home movies we took as a family. In one, we are at a summer bungalow colony in upstate New York. Someone is filming my father, who is setting up a beach chair with a cigarette dangling from the side of his mouth. He takes his time unfolding the various sections of the chair, setting them in place, and folding a beach towel on the back. Then he settles himself into the chair, only the chair is not stable and it moves forward as he leans back and bumps him right in the back of his head. He laughs with a wide grin, and so does anyone who watches that movie. His natural laugh in the face of that silliness and his own incompetence in setting up the chair is also part of his legacy. Weekly visits with my father took me from a lonely girlhood through a stormy adolescence to the cusp of adulthood. From the time my parents divorced until shortly before I turned 18 and left for college, my father was court-ordered to visit me once a week. At least that is what I understood. I was given the impression that the court would have him or me arrested if the visits didn't take place. He was also required to pay a small amount of child support, which he brought in an envelope and gave to me to give to my mother. So every week he picked me up and took me out to dinner. We went to a Chinese or Italian restaurant. I ordered either a combination plate with egg roll, fried rice, and spare ribs, or a baked ziti and a salad. Left on our own, my father and I struggled to make awkward conversation. I reported on my grades in school each week. During the season, there were conversations about baseball. He was a lifelong Giants fan, disappointed but willing to follow them even after they abandoned New York. For some reason, I rooted for the Yankees in the days of Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris. I think he even once took me to a Yankee game on a weekend. I had a crush on the pitcher Mel Stottlemyre. Shortly after the divorce, he remarried. She was a woman with 2 children of her own. I met them once or twice. My mother insisted that the court agreement did not include visits to his new home and family. The summer before I left for college, in a campaign of defiance against my mother's rules, I spent some actual time at the apartment with my father and his second wife, Betty. Betty was like my mother in some ways. She was very responsible, got up every morning and took the subway to work. She worked for the IRS. She was a lot jazzier looking than my mom. She had bright red hair and wore lots of makeup, including lipstick that matched her hair color. She laughed loudly and was always kind to me. I left for college some months before my 18th birthday. My father was required to make child support payments until I was 19. Since my mother remarried, he sent me a letter every month and a money order for the child support payments made out directly to me. During my sophomore year of college, I turned 19. The payments were no longer required and the letters stopped coming. I didn't think much about it until one day I heard from Betty. She asked if I knew where my father was. I didn't, and neither did she. For the next 10 years, no one had any idea where he had gone.
Wait, what happened?
Amazing. Madeleine, that is such an incredible, beautiful, and poignant excavation a family history. That's amazing, amazing, amazing. Oh, I feel so moved. Let me just remind you, in case you didn't see, if you have questions for the writers, feel free to add them to the chat. At the end of our reading, we'll have a brief little Q&A with the writers. So feel free to add questions in the chat for them there throughout the readings and afterward. Oh, all right. Next up is Kimberly Perez. Kimberly lives in Amherst, Massachusetts, and can be seen most days on Zoom with ambient sounds of classical saxophone and a barking dog. I kind of hope that we hear some classical saxophone in the background tonight. It's always fun during workshops. While she enjoys spending time alone, she often finds her persistent yet sluggish commitment to writing grueling and lonely. Yes, I hear that. Writers in Progress, with its skilled, fabulous, and oh so generous teachers who bring together cool and badass communities, makes both writing and a pandemic much more bearable. I could not agree more. Please welcome Kimberly. Kimberly, do you mind unmuting yourself and I'll spotlight you? There we go. Thanks. Oh. There we go.
Thank you for allowing me to share this work in progress. A man put his hands on me, a stranger, a strange man, on New Year's Eve in the symphony hall with the ceiling shaped like a violin, seated between two men, two strange men, men strangers to me, seated at the edge of circumstance and choice. Half a year into this relationship, still unexpected and new, we move out from one another into the public of his family, the second time in the span of 2 months across 3 holidays. Again, we stay with his parents in the house he lived most of his childhood. To say it is not going well is a generous characterization that nevertheless shows the efforts each of us put forth to make it seem otherwise. In the dark of his childhood bedroom, arms slung across his body, both because it feels good and because I am afraid I will fall over the side of this narrow bed that is also too short for me, so my feet hang off the edge, I whisper to him that I don't think his parents like me. He listens to me in the way he does, holding space, neither confirming nor denying. He wants it to be going better than it is. I take this as confirmation that these people do not like me, though no one says it. Wouldn't it be great if they had? If we each had just come out and said it? I probably didn't say that, though I wish I had, and instead remind him of what they did say in front of their house before we waved goodbye from the car ride, during which I will eat a lot of Skittles, which was, "Thanks for the help," which I read as both sincere gratitude for me participating in cooking for and cleaning up after a Thanksgiving for 15, yet notably absent any commentary on my relationship to their only child, which I imagine might have been their way of clinging to their version of him and their version for him, which did not include me, which I will learn only later to be a version of the truth, which stands alongside my memory of saying something like, "Thanks for having me," instead of, "I don't like you," which, although reasonable and truthful, was probably my way of clinging to a relationship that I am still committed to, and also a habit of making family, which I learned from my family, who made family out of anyone who came into our lives and our house, a habit that I hold on to despite having severed from the family into which I was born. Having said nothing of the sort, 1 month later, I am seated again with him at the breakfast nook in his parents' house, because the house is big enough to have a room called a nook, insecure and unfamiliar with how to move through this house and its family, trying to decide what to do on the eve of the new year. As memories go, he and I remember differently whether his parents invite us to go with them to their friend's party that evening. I am sure we were not invited, and he is sure I said no. In my story, the invitation is but the backdrop to the way my face still burns from the week prior, when the 4 of us attended a party at which his parents introduced me as his friend, when they introduced me at all. When I locate the first party I attended next to the second party I didn't, next to the one that will happen the next day, the burn becomes a scar, thick and shiny and tender. The party that will come tomorrow, no one can avoid invitation or decline, as it is at this house, hosting over 100. I again offered to help my way of avoiding talking to people and having something to do with myself. I could not have anticipated that my offer to help will result in a guest asking me if I am the help by way of a request for a more sophisticated salt than the presumably table salt set out for guests. After the guests have gone, before he and I head back up the winding stairs to the narrow bed, during the cleanup, there is talk of the night. While I do my best to listen, I am asked about my night, and as I am prone to do, rather than keep it to myself or save it for pillow talk, I turn the story into a joke in the way that jokes sometimes reveal and sometimes punish. Because I am funny, there is laughter almost all around, save his parents, who are sure I have misunderstood and wonder why I didn't introduce myself. But tomorrow has not yet happened. The scar has yet to set. And in the nook, he is telling me of his dream to go to the symphony on New Year's Eve. And I, as I do in every relationship I have ever been in, do what I can to realize that person's dream, and am quick to open my laptop to find tickets. Of the handful of single seats still available, 2 are in the same section within squinting and waving distance of one another, and I put them into the cart, adding to the debt I have accumulated over an adulthood and in a profession in which I try to purchase my way into looking like I belong. I insist he take the seat with the better view of the orchestra, it being his dream and all. Out of breath because we have arrived later than I would have liked, yet giddy and high from the expensive champagne we share in the fancy bar in the lobby, I settle myself between the pair of strange men. As I peer first across the section, smiling and waving, and then down from the balcony at the musicians, as the musicians warm their instruments, making not yet music, but sounds that feel meaningful, in the sparkly air, I enter the dreaminess of his dream. For a moment, I allow myself to float on the bubbles, to be here, and because I am here, have paid to be here, tell myself I belong. The first time the stranger slips his hand across the armrest and makes contact with my body, I smell the alcohol on his breath. I shift. I assume I must have lost track of my body in the wonder of the space and the space between he and I. Put another way, when the stranger first put his hands on me, I did nothing other than try to contain, to control myself, having done wrong. The next time it happened, and the time after that, and after that I lost count, watching the orchestra, now not from the seat designed to give each person their own space, but from the ceiling shaped like a violin, from a spot I find between the precisely measured slats that create the effect of waves, and that I now see as making sound that moves up from the musicians, whose eyes move from their music stands to the conductor, who sways and speaks with his hands, and who sometimes turns to tell the audience stories about what we each hear. From up here, I watch too over myself, body separate from voice, silent and frozen. The next thing that happens is, I think, visible only from up here, heard only by me. My right foot in its black combat boot, stabilized by the left foot in its matching black combat boot, bound by the black tights up right and left calves and knees, up and under the black wool dress that blankets thighs, rises high in the air. From the effort it takes to raise right foot, a rush of air moves between legs, propels the combat boot up and then toward down. On the way down, my fantasy, my own fucking fantasy fails me. I fail myself. I remind myself that should the right combat boot slam itself against the left foot of the stranger to my right, who has made unauthorized contact with my body, should my body, at the unforgiving and unsatisfied sound of his shattering foot, howl a howl that pierces the waves of sound that still into silence, save the whimpers of the stranger, that the eyes of the hall will be on me as the cause of the problem, of the usher who will shush me, and the conductor and the conducted who will continue, carry on. While I am the one who interprets I am the one who interrupts my own imagination, I too am the one who will draw the line between my stilled and silent body, between the strange man now and the not strange men who put their hands on me before, without my consent, before I knew language, hands whose touch interrupted what language and the voice I could and would know. Hands across a body, across a lifetime that were initiated and authorized, each hand not a cause, but a condition of the other, of history, bigotry, misogyny, class warfare. Conditions that I came to know through communication and the study of communication. Communication, a thing, a discipline, a major in college, under which some people study and about which other people make jokes that I sometimes think are funny and at other times I don't understand. When I was 28, living in Los Angeles, working as a legal secretary at a job at which I worked hard but didn't understand, a woman I worked with took note of my age and explained that I was entering a crucial moment in my astrology. I accept her offer to read my chart and listen as she tells me about the house under which my Saturn return lands, communication and family. My move to Los Angeles, having begun a separation from my family that would take nearly another 20 years to unfold, I remember my then high-heeled feet curl in against themselves, trying to make more space between them and the casing I forced them into because at the time they made me feel powerful. What I then heard in her reading reinforced my then belief, secured at the intersection of cultures, of family and the working class, which was that one could not escape, much less do without family. What I know now is the place where the jokes met my ignorance, ignorance that was sometimes willful and sometimes as a result of denied access, that this place often shows up as ambivalence, is nevertheless too a shelter, that in the protection of that shelter, I forge space, space from the threats that impose silence, and in the absence of silence, the contours of and the constraints on the shapes my stories could take. Space also in which I came to understand shapes as shapes, shapes that could be shattered and from which the shards to form shields with sharp edges through which I could sift and sort and make something else. And so this then is not the story of what happened, but how I learned to talk about it differently. Thank you.
So beautiful, Kimberly. Thank you so much. We're going to start the Q&A session. So if you have questions for writers, please add them in the chat. It's been fun to watch along in the chat and see everyone commenting on the power of these incredible pieces and the amazing work that these writers shared tonight. So I'm going to actually pass it over to Dory, who's going to lead the Q&A section of the evening. And also at the same time, try to spotlight all the writers so that we can see everyone at once. Just give me 1 minute to do that while Dory starts.
Thank you, Emily. And thank you, Kimberly and Madeleine, Carolyn, for those really moving readings. So there we go. So I'll start with the I think what I'd sort of like to do, can we do this, Emily? Can I name somebody to ask their own question so that we can see other people's faces, or is that just too complicated?
I'm not sure that'll work with the spotlight.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and read the questions then. So here's a question that came up for you, Carolyn, by a couple of people actually, about whether or not there are lessons from your music career that you've been able to apply to your writing process, or if the artistry, you know, the artist's process in both mediums echoes each other in some way. Could you speak to that?
Sure, yeah, definitely. I think early on in the band, when we were just getting started, you know, and this is going back in the day, and a friend of mine said, regarding the sort of just relentless doing of it, he said it's an endurance test. And I know pretty much up until I joined the band, I'd always been a sprinter. I was never a long distance runner. I'm, you know, I like short-term gratification, but being in the band, I mean, it definitely helped me to understand, you know, very delayed gratification, like maybe never. And also, so I would say the endurance test part definitely applies. And the other part is just like, everybody's got an opinion and everybody is going to think something about what you're doing, and don't quit your day job, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. Your lyrics are too repetitive. Okay. You know, hello, like, have you ever heard any rock song ever? But the point being is that it's not that you become hubristic or, you know, arrogant because of that, but you just start to realize that, you know, it often says more about the person who's saying it. So you start to just get a little bit better about handling feedback. So I would say just all of those things. And then the part about community, I mean, I certainly couldn't have been a solo artist in a band. I mean, you know, and that's what's hard about being a writer, is you are kind of a solo artist. So finding community. Thank you, Writers in Progress.
It's so true. That's why we do this. Thank you. Another question that came up for you, Carolyn, is about, because your delivery was so amazing. And it's clear that you have some sort of theater background, and several people asked about that and wanted to know.
Well,
and also I was curious about whether that, you know, because obviously you do, but whether that also influences the way you write.
Probably. I mean, yes, I do have a theater background. I was voted most dramatic in high school. Okay. Confessional. Yes. And so, and you know, I like making people laugh. So yeah, I think when I'm writing, I'm thinking about it rhythmically and musically, and also what it might be out loud. And that's why it's great to do readings, because then you actually hear what you're writing, which can really add something. I mean, I always end up revising when I'm practicing for a reading. So I think it's very important for writers to do that. But yeah, I think the theater was definitely, in terms of understanding the arc of storytelling. I mean, it's kind of, I think all of these art mediums are kind of from the same source, you know, it's just we're expressing them differently. So.
Well, thank you. I mean,
it's a
pleasure to hear you read and to hear your dialogue.
Thank you. Thank you.
Madeleine, a question that came up for you is, how have you collected so many family stories? And is this from memory or from interviews with family members, or have you had to do research in order to find some of this material? How do you come up with this?
It's mostly memory. It's all experiences I lived that stayed with me. I've been writing about them for a long time. So there are pieces of this that were written years ago, and some that, you know, I've filled in more recently. I have a lot of artifacts. I have, you know, photographs and things. You know, I mentioned the things my father brought back in the war. I have a lot of stuff that I've held on to, and those evoke memories. It's not from interviewing anybody, because it's my point of view, and you'll notice none of my family are here, except for my daughter. But it's the way I saw it. It's not necessarily the way anyone else in my family experienced it.
That's so interesting. And do you ever use those artifacts or those objects or photographs to kind of spur your writing, to trigger memories?
Yeah, absolutely. The story eventually gets to after my father dies, and I went to where he was living and got a lot of his things, and I put them all in an album, and with the support of the other people in the revision group, I went ahead recently and took a look at that album. It's kind of emotional and was a little hard to do, but it really helped to spur the writing on, to sit and look at those pieces.
That's wonderful. There's so much immediacy in some of that. I also wondered about your tone. I love the way your writing sort of walks this line between humor and tragedy. There's a lot of dark humor and pathos in the writing. And I was curious if you have any model writers, any memoirists that have inspired you with their tone.
Oh, that's
I know
not
that's
the
a hard
world's greatest reader, but I would say like someone like David Sedaris, that his kind of humor I think is somewhat similar to mine. And my greatest hero is Mel Brooks. So, and I come from a family of pretty funny people.
It's wonderful. I love those lines where, it starts out tragic and then tips into humor all of a sudden. Kimberly, Maria wanted to know how much of the shape and style and voice in that amazing piece you read happened in the first draft, and how much of it was in revision. Like, does it just come out that way? That's what we want to know. I think you're muted. Are you muted? Oh, there you go.
Okay. A lot comes out in revision. I think the quote that Emily read at the beginning really speaks to that. For me, I think what first comes out is the feeling and the story that some part of me wants to tell, and then in the revision, the more complexity of the relationships and the circumstances, then those come out after a lot of revision.
Well, that's inspiring to all of us. And do you mind talking for a minute about sort of the nexus of this piece and what inspired it?
In my yeah, I think the nexus of the piece is the intersection of my day job as an academic, as a communication, as a person who researches communication. I have questions about how things happen, but they always intersect with things that happen to me that I don't really have understanding of, and that I can't stop thinking about or dreaming about. And then they find their way somewhere around usually 3 a.m. in stories that won't let me sleep.
I'd love to, the theme in your work of things that aren't said or done, but that live sort of right there under the surface of acceptable discourse and behavior. And I love these dips into what could have been, should have been, might have been, what she could have done, what they might have said, what a relief, and it creates this really interesting fluidity in time, space, and a kind of complex tapestry. I thought it was really amazing. Thank you. And then a couple questions for all of you that people in this group, in this audience, are pretty much all writers, and all writers are insatiably wanting to know about other writers' processes, I find. So what are your processes? How do you guys have writing schedules? Do you write a certain time of day every day? Do you write when the mood strikes you? Like, be honest. Do you write from like 4 to 7 every morning?
I think I can speak on the behalf of all of us to say that we have a rigorous program that starts at 4, and we do a boot camp together. So that's about 2 hours of just really intense, like, calisthenics. And then Right? You guys? I don't know. Do you, who wants to, I mean, okay, I'll just say my process is, I mean, God, I don't know, like, give me a deadline, give me a, I work, the only way I say, and again, the only way that I ever learned bass was because my boyfriend at the time booked a show in Buffalo. And so 4 months after I picked up the bass, I played a show. So my thing is, so showing up for groups, having writing coaches, having teachers, having somebody who's going to hear, someone at the receiving end. But then, I don't know, every day, I think having like Scrivener is a program that a lot of people use that helps with word count. So I think having writing groups, we keep each other accountable. I don't know. What do you all think?
Yeah, I would say for me, all of my initial writing comes out in workshops. I very rarely do an original writing on my own. I've been writing in workshops for years. Some of my workshop colleagues are here, and that's where I start everything. And then I wish I could say I wrote every day for 2 hours. That's my goal, is to write every day for 2 or 3 hours, and I meet that about maybe 20% of the time, every few days. And I write sometimes in the middle of the day, sometimes at night. I wish there was an order to it, but there isn't.
And what about you, Kimberly?
I schedule writing on my calendar every single week, sometimes for months at a time. And occasionally I will show up, especially if it's a writing group. And sometimes even then I write when the camera is off. But one of the things that we have been talking a bit about in the revision workshop is, for me, that has worked really well, is to ritualize the writing process. And so I have a thing I do when I start, and then I have a thing I do at the end. And for me, it's like that bounded space where I can be like, okay, I'm going to do this, and I know that there's an end, and then I can go about my life. So for me, that has been a real, it really saves my writing.
Yeah, and I'll just, it makes me remember too, is I set a timer all the time. So I just set a timer, 45 minutes, 20 minutes. It just gives me, it makes me feel safe because I think part of the reason as writers, we're afraid, it's not just that we're afraid of starting, I think we're afraid that we're never gonna stop once we start. That's my fear sometimes. I'm gonna go off the deep end, and then you're gonna I'm never gonna cook dinner, I'm never gonna clean the house, I'm never gonna take care of the dog. And so having a timer lets me know that it's safe and it's contained. So
I agree.
I hope that.
Yeah, so all of those things, a timer, having accountability is what I'm hearing, right? Being in the company of other writers, having a deadline, having to perform it for someone else, which is why we have these readings. It's kind of hard to see, but I just posted a link. I don't know if it's going to work, to a Poets and Writers
It works. It works.
Yeah.
By Jordan Kisner about keeping a schedule or not, and how, so many writers believe that other writers have these magical schedules, that they keep religiously, and almost nobody actually does that. So I just thought that was a refreshing article to read. So thank you all so much. This has been amazing and inspiring. All the readers. Emily, thank you for organizing it.
Thanks, Emily.
For being such a great WIP ambassador. We do have a bunch of really exciting workshops coming up this spring and summer. So check out the workshops on the website if you haven't yet. There's so many cool things coming up from Jacqueline, who's here. Jacqueline Sheehan is doing a couple things on writing from the senses and pacing and research and backstory. Suzanne Dunlap has this amazing series on blueprinting your book and structure and looking at the big picture. Emily is taking over for a little while Kathy Luna's Memoir workshop on Wednesday mornings, which is a great group if you're working on a memoir and you need the time and accountability and some craft tips. And then there's some other really interesting things coming up this spring. So we have one on tarot for writers, which I'm super excited about. Emily Nagoski is doing her writing sex workshop, and we have a new person, Sarah Browning, who some of you might know, the poet, who's going to be teaching a political poetry workshop. I won't bore you with all the rest, but check it out on our website, because there's some really great stuff that we're very excited about. And thank you all for being here. Yay.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you,
Bye, everyone.
guys.
So long, everyone.
Great to see you. Bye.
See
Bye,
you. Great
family.
job.
Bye, friends. Good night, John Boy. Good night, Uncle Joe. Good night, Daddy. Good night, Mommy.
Good night.
This was so fun. Thanks, you guys. Oh, are we going to say is the core group? Bye, Melissa. Bye, Joe. Nephew Joe. So good to see you.
I'm going to save the chat too, in case any of you want to see it.
That'd be
Especially
great.
the readers, some people said some really wonderful things while you were reading. So in case you didn't get a chance to look through it, I'll send that to you after the reading.
How do you do that, Emily? How do you save the chat?
See the little 3 dots right next to file in the chat?
Yeah.
If you click on that, and then at the top there's save chat.
Oh, look at that. I didn't even know that was a thing. So then does it just like save to your desktop or something?
Yes.
That's really cool.
You want to stop recording?
Yes.